This episode is probably going to be one of my favorites, depending on how long this whole series goes and how long the podcast goes. I feel like this is going to be a very special one, to me at least, and hopefully it is to the person that I'm going to be talking about. This episode is going to be fully dedicated to my wife. I figured that it's getting around the time that it's Valentine's Day. And I wanted to, you know, talk about my wife a little bit because she is the biggest reason as to why I'm even here and why I'm even still doing content creation is because of her and the motivation that she gives me every single day that I am privileged to be with her. And I really want to say before we get into that, thank you everybody so much for continuing to support the podcast. Whatever forever we are on episode 4. I'm really thankful for the feedback and everybody's comments and love. And if you share it to your friends, I really do appreciate it. Also, for those of you guys who still don't know, we are officially on Spotify. Every single episode that I posted has also been posted simultaneously on Spotify. So check the links down below to check out the Spotify as well. Leave a rating if you can. But getting back into what I really want to talk about and who I really want to talk about, I want to talk about my wife a little bit, for a bit, for a while. I could make this whole podcast, honestly, I could dedicate it to just talking about my wife. That's how much I love talking about her. I've talked about her, countless times and in countless different situations throughout my life. And I'm not ashamed of it. You know what I mean? I'm not ashamed of it. I don't care what other people think of me. I am proud to be the husband of the person that I'm married to, my wife. And if anybody has a problem with it, then so fucking be it, because I do not give one single fuck. My wife is somebody who doesn't give herself a lot of credit when it comes to things that she achieves or just how incredibly smart she is. Whenever I see her, whenever I find myself having a conversation with her, I feel as if I fall in love with her all over again. And for me, it's just the little things when we're in bed before we go to sleep and she's talking to me. Maybe we're a little bit high or something like that. But she's talking to me and I'm just looking at her, and I feel incredibly lucky and incredibly privileged that I get to spend my nights with her, fall asleep to her, and wake up to her being the first thing that I see in the morning. It gives me that extra motivation of, the fucking 15 alarms that I set off. If I turn around, she is my reminder of me always striving to be a better version than I was the previous day. And just to give you guys a little bit of a backstory of how we met, I met her during the Facebook era. And at the time, I think when I really heavily got into Facebook, I was in high school. I was on Facebook in middle school or whatever, but it was really in high school when I like really tried. I think there was like a cap of like 5,000 friends, and I think I reached 3,000. I think it was before I ended up deleting my account. But it was one of those things where I loved being on social media, and I talked about it previously, but during high school I really was slacking in my school, right? I was failing. I had my parents always telling me stuff, and I had to lie about, the typical lies that you tell your parents when you're failing, like, oh, the teacher forgot to give me my progress report, or my card or whatever with my grades. Why can I not fucking think of the name? My report card. Or they didn't give us homework, when in reality I had like 15 essays due the next day. You know what I mean? And so I kind of put my school to the side, and I very much focused on the social aspect of it, meeting new people, getting to know people on Facebook, and adding everybody and going out to do things or whatever, right? And so I met my wife initially through Facebook, through mutual friends. Because even though I went to one high school, I knew people from the other high school, and as well as just random people that I met along the way. And my wife was one of those people that I met along the way, right? Through mutual friends and just having other friends in common. And so we didn't really speak a whole lot. We didn't really talk a whole lot. Even if we did, it was very public. You know, it was one of those things where we potentially like did the whole like for a TBH on your page, right? Anybody remembers that? Maybe poking. I'm not sure if we did poking, but I know we did the whole like for whatever, right? And we had a couple of those interactions, and then I remember specifically the thing that got us to talk a little bit more was when, you know, the whole unfortunate passing of Mitch Luker, the former frontman of Suicide Silence, one of my favorite bands at the time. And he passed away, and they had a memorial show. And they had promised that they were going to release like a documentary slash live recording DVD of it. And we were so excited about it, right? Because again, we were like, it was like how when Michael Jackson died or when Kobe Bryant died, for us, the Mitch Luker passing away was on that same level, right? It was pretty huge within that scene. And so we were like, oh, once this comes out, we're going to hang out. We're going to blast it. I have a 6 stereo on my TV or whatever she was telling me. And we never did that. And honestly, I don't even know if they released that documentary. So I got to go check up on if that's even possible to see. But we never ended up doing that. But it was the thing that, you know, kept us coming back to each other. And that was our interactions whenever we did talk to each other. And I think we even exchanged a couple DMs, but again, it was very much just that same topic with the occasional of like, oh, how are you doing? I think I remember how that's how the conversations went. But I never really had any feelings, you know, especially in the beginning for her. She was just one of those people that I again would interact here and there on Facebook. We would like each other's pictures or whatever. But you know, the more that we talk, the more that I, you know, consider her more of a friend. And again, she wasn't at the high school that I went to. She was at the other high school. And so again, my interactions with her were very, very much centered around Facebook. Around that time, and you know, during the time that I initially met her, and even before that, relationships to me just kind of came and went. Relationships, a lot of the time, they didn't really hold a lot of meaning. And I know that might be a little bit sad or maybe a little bit, you know, of a jerk thing to say or of an asshole-ish thing to say. But my first relationship was in middle school. And it was the first relationship that I ever had. And it was with a girl that I had never met. She didn't go to my elementary school. She was completely new to my friend group in middle school. And it felt as if like, kind of felt like one of those cheesy teenager movies, right? Where the kid gets his first girlfriend and it's pretty cool. You know, they talk a bit here and there, but of course it's in middle school. And so we broke up. I specifically remember we broke up because I was talking to somebody who I never usually speak to. And I think I mentioned the fact that I was thinking of breaking up with her, but ultimately I decided that I wasn't going to. And then that person went and snitched to her and she ended up breaking up with me just so that, you know, I couldn't say that I broke up with her. Yeah, typical middle school shit. But after that, I got into relationships again that were just very, very short. You know, I think some of the shortest ones really only lasted about a couple days, maybe even less, maybe 1 or 2 days, to be honest. And I think, again, Facebook heavily influenced that. You know how you have the whole relationship status thing? It was very common for people to get into these, I don't want to call them fake relationships. I'm pretty sure that some were pretty serious, but there were a lot of people that just used that and, you know, maybe potentially did end up going out, but it wasn't really too serious. It was more so just for the whole Facebook early day clout sort of thing, right? And so I was in a lot of relationships where I don't even really consider them that. You know, it wasn't anything like that I consider as super serious. And my wife kind of makes fun of me for this because we've talked about my exes or whatever and previous relationship situations and stories and whatnot. And I've told my wife that I've never been rejected because I haven't. But it's not a flex or anything like that, I promise. I say that because I would only really get into relationships where I knew that the person that I potentially was going to get in a relationship with was already interested in me. You know, I never really shot my shot with anybody that I didn't even know or maybe wanted to really go out with, but they didn't really know me like that. Or where I knew that I had some chance of rejection. Somebody would come up to me and say, "Hey, I like you," or maybe we're already talking, and that conversation gets brought up, and we would just start going out, right? So I've never been in. I don't think I've purposely have never put myself in a situation where I would get rejected. Not because I want to say that I've never been rejected, but because I fucking dread that humiliation. I fucking dreaded that humiliation. So I never overstepped my boundaries. I think I had my standards were pretty much non-existent, or maybe they were just not there fully developed yet just yet, but I knew that I for sure did not want to humiliate myself, so I never really put myself in that situation. So when somebody came up to me, or admitted that they had a crush on me or liked me, I'd be like, okay, fine, yeah, let's do it, because it takes away the dread that I had from being rejected, right? I was just kind of happy that somebody was sort of interested in me, right? Going into high school, I was in a relationship where it was very on and off. It was kind of a very toxic relationship. Just again, not without getting into too much detail. That relationship I was cheated on, and I feel like it was multiple times. But it was a situation where I potentially was single, they were single, and we would just kind of bounce back on each other, back to each other, and we would just not really do much. It never was different. It never really escalated into a more serious relationship. It was just the easy thing to do because, again, we didn't want to be single, and we just kind of bounced back on each other once we were single. And it was, again, on and off, and it was so miserable. So you could already imagine how low my standards were for relationships. The only other serious relationship that I was in only lasted a couple of months, and it wasn't anything to the serious level, or they didn't have that serious factor as the relationship that I had when I was only the boyfriend of my now wife, right? And again, through that, I met a ton of different people. I was at one high school to start off when I started high school. And again, I was just a really bad student. And I remember one day I got called to the principal's office, to the counselor's office, actually, not the principal's. And I go into her office, and sure enough, my mom is there already. And I'm like, okay, something's about to go down, right? If my mom was already here, right? And so they talk to my mom saying how I'm messing up in high school, that I'm going to be held back again, because at that point I was a reclassified freshman, which means that I didn't have enough credits to be considered a sophomore. And if I were to be considered a sophomore in that year, my second year of high school, it would be very late. It would be well into my junior year. And at that point, I would be like pretty held back, right, if I continued down the path that I was going in. And so the remedy, or the solution that they found, was to send me to a alternative high school, right? And of course, my mom, literally willing to do anything so I could get off my ass and take school seriously, said yes, left me with no choice, and I ended up going over there. So I knew people from essentially the three main high schools of the town that I live in, still to this day. And so I started to hang out with people within my scene, the scene kid scene, essentially, listening to a certain type of music. And whenever we would hang out, when me and my friends would hang out, if I wasn't skating with them, we would meet up at these local shows, regardless if we were into the bands or not, or if we even knew the bands. We would just use that as a way to meet up with one another and hang out for the weekend or during the weekend. And I met a couple of people that were also mutual friends of my wife at the time, my girlfriend at the time, not even my girlfriend at that point. But, I started to talk to her a little bit more. Because she just kept, appearing on my feed, appearing on my posts, and, we would like each other's pictures or whatever. And so I started to talk to her a little bit more casual, kind of removing myself from the other conversations that we would have about the whole Mitch Luker concert or whatever. And it was just very casual, but we were talking on a more, talking about different things. And I remember one day there was like a Mardi Gras parade. I honestly don't even know why we have here in the town that I live in a Mardi Gras parade. It feels kind of weird that we do, but there's a Mardi Gras parade. And the town that I live in is very small, And when there's something like that, like a community event that happens, pretty much essentially the entire town is there, right? Because it gives us an excuse to go out and do something here around the town and meet up with friends again. And so during that time, during that era, I was getting grounded left and right because I was either getting caught smoking weed, again being a bad student, and just overall the trust with my parents was not really there. And so during that Mardi Gras parade, when the day came, I was very much grounded to the point where I couldn't go to the Mardi Gras alone with my friends. I had to go with my mom and my little sister, and I was not to leave their side whatsoever. And so I remember stopping by and like really I seeing my friends and really wanting to talk to them, but my mom didn't let me. And as we were leaving, I ran across a group of friends, some people that I met again through Facebook or have hung out with them previously in person. And I saw them and I practically had to beg my mom to let me just stay for like 5 minutes and say hi. Luckily, my little sister was interested in like a booth a little bit a ways from the group of friends. And my mom was like reluctantly said, yeah, she just sucked it up and she went with my little sister, which again, they weren't going to be too far away so she could keep an eye on me just in case I magically fucking spawned a blunt out of my ass or something like that, right? And just started to chief it in front of her because I'm fiending. It's so wild. And so I start, talking to everybody, and sure enough, my now wife is there. And my first impressions of her weren't even ones that I maybe intentionally had thought. I wasn't like, oh, looking at her looks or anything like that. I was just like, oh, like I could finally put a like an actual moving like person to the pictures I've seen on Facebook, right? I could actually envision how you look like in person. And she at the time was very of like the punk scene, very much into the scene kid scene, more kind of like the emo side of things as well. Not so much the punk, but very not so much the goth, the scene, but more goth and punk combined. And I think what did it for me, because after that I really wanted to talk to her more. The thing that did it for me was the glasses. I think at the time at the time she was when I met her, she wore glasses before she got her eye surgery, LASIK eye surgery. She wore glasses. And I don't know if it's just a thing or maybe if it's just like I don't know what it is, but I have a thing for girls with glasses, right? And so even if I wasn't necessarily looking at her as me trying to hit on her or anything like that, because I wasn't trying to make anybody uncomfortable, just for whatever reason, the glasses and her just kind of clicked with me, and I'm like, okay, I went home and I think one of the first things I did was try to talk to her more. But I was chatting everybody up there. I was trying to make jokes, making a good impression. And again, I wasn't necessarily trying to get her to look at me a certain way or anything like that, or get her attention per se. But I was happy to meet her. Again, it was a thing where we had talked previously and it was cool to actually meet her in person. But for whatever reason, I just left that with that impression of, I kind of want to talk to her a little bit more. I kind of really want to get to know her a little bit more. And I think shortly after that, I tried to make an effort to really talk to her about, again, different things. And eventually the topic of hanging out got brought up. We never really figured out how. I don't know why it was so hard for us to meet up, or just meet up somewhere public or something like that, just to hang out, not really to do anything, but just simply for the sake of hanging out. But it wasn't until one of our mutual friends kind of was like, I'm gonna set these two up, essentially, right? And before I fully flame her, before I fully tell you the type of person that she is, the mutual friend that we had, I will give her essentially the benefit of the doubt of essentially making that day happen, right? Making it the first day that we hang out. And so that is where the good things about her end. She is such a snake. She turned out to be the type of person that uses your personal trauma that you potentially trusted her in the moment and you told her. She uses that and she goes around and uses it as conversation starters. You know how whenever you're trying to start up a conversation with someone, you ask them about the weather, you ask them how their day is going, or just something relatable. They use people's secrets as a conversation starters just because she is addicted to the drama and wants people to see her as the center of attention, right? Because she's always like telling us these wild stories about God knows who this time now, right? And so they ask like, hey, like we you guys should hang out, you know, I'll come through or whatever. And we're like, okay, yeah, let's do it. And so they walked to my house. I lived on one end of the town, and my, you know, my now wife lived on the other side of town, which her parents still lived in. But they were hanging out at our mutual friend's house, which was still pretty fucking far away. It's like easily like a 45 1 hour walk, right? But whatever, they did it, and it's not like I could have picked them up anyways or done anything. I was broke. I didn't have a car. The only thing I had to my name was a skateboard and a dream. And so they ended up showing up to my house, and we go into my room, and what proceeded was probably one of the most awkward interactions we've ever had, me and her. um I, in my room at the time at my parents' house, I had one of those like futon things that kind of uh you know, you could turn it into a sofa or you could turn it into a bed essentially, right? And it wasn't a sofa. She was sitting on one end of the sofa, I was on my bed all the way over here, and our mutual friend was kind of in the middle of us, kind of like looking back and forth at us, expecting us to hopefully talk at some point, because we did not exchange more than a handful of words when we were there. We did talk at some point, but it actually wasn't in person or to each other there in the same room. We were on Kick sending each other messages. I'm gonna let that sit in for a bit because it was really awkward. But to, you know, to give myself some credit, it was the first time that I was actually meeting her, and to be completely honest with you, I was already catching feelings for her. And through that mutual friend, she told me that she was starting to catch feelings for me just a tad bit, that she was a little bit more cautious because she had, of course, been in previous relationships, and she, you know, coming off a bad relationship, she was kind of skeptical about if she really wanted to be in another relationship after that, right? So soon after that, you know, she wanted to be single for a while, so she wasn't sure, but that she did, you know, to her, you know, using her words, like me just a little bit. And so I didn't fully want to give up, right? Because I just really, again, I was starting to feel something for her, and I didn't want to mess it over, but I just didn't know what to do at the time. It just felt so awkward. I didn't know what to say. And it was one of the first times where I was just kind of essentially speechless because I just didn't know what to do. And usually, you know, I'm kind of, I like to give myself some credit. Okay, I guess I'm easy to talk to, and I like talking to people. But at that point, I just did not know what the fuck to say, and it was incredibly awkward. And at some point, my now wife, she gets a text from her mom because she's not at her friend's house where she was intended to be. And so she said, oh well, we left, we came to another friend's house, and I'm here. And so her mom essentially said, you better be outside because I'm going to pick you up in a couple of minutes, and you better be there. And so she like essentially says bye. She rushes out to the front of my house, and I go out on the advice of our mutual friend, and she kind of put it to me like, oh, go outside, maybe she wants to give you a kiss or something. And so I go outside, not with the intent of getting a kiss or anything like that, but because I didn't want to screw it up. I wanted to make sure that she was okay. It was fucking dark outside, and you know, my neighborhood where my parents lived and live still isn't exactly sketchy. It's a very suburban, very nice neighborhood, but it was nighttime, you know. I didn't want her to feel nervous, and I can tell that she was pretty anxious because she was pacing kind of back and forth, maybe potentially feeling, you know, that awkwardness that just occurred, but also because, you know, her mom, you know, I came to find out is a little bit strict. My mother-in-law now is a little bit strict, and I could only imagine, you know, she didn't want to get in trouble. And so she gets picked up, and you know, I'm kind of left defeated but still determined. And you know, that mutual friend hangs out there for a little bit, and I don't know if she left at some point or whatever, but she just ended up leaving, and I just kind of felt defeated and deflated at that point. But again, that whole situation really, really motivated to me to really, just really, really try, make it work. And if I wasn't already catching feelings, I definitely was after that. I really wanted to keep on talking to her, make things right. And we would spend countless days just talking to one another really, really late into the night, just talking about literally whatever, maybe at times just exchanging emojis because we ran out of conversation, but we still wanted to message each other. And eventually we kind of made it clear that we were pretty much into each other at that point, that we really liked each other at that point. And we decided, hey, maybe we should just hang out, me and you. We should really make an effort to hang out and just get to know each other and see if we actually want to be with one another. And we did. We set a day. She told me the area. I say the area because she didn't tell me the exact number of her house or the exact street. She essentially told me a general area. And it was in a neighborhood that I had never been in before, never had even like drove by before, right? And so my sister at that time, she wasn't living at my parents' house with us, so she was there for the weekend at my parents' house. And she had something to do that day, that Saturday, in the very early in the morning. And what do? I don't tell my mom to give me a ride. I don't wait like a normal person at a reasonable time to ask their parents to drop them off at a friend's house. Instead, I wake up as soon as I hear my sister wake up, and I ask her if she could give me a ride to this neighborhood that I've never been to go visit a girl. And she said, have you asked mom yet? I said yes. I for sure lied at that point. And so she got ready and she gave me a ride there, and then she went off to do whatever she needed to do. And at the time, I didn't have a cell phone. The concept of me having a cell phone was extremely foreign. I didn't get my first cell phone. I think I was already in a relationship with my now wife, and my big sister moved to the town close to mine, and she gave me like this shitty Windows phone. But to me, I was just so happy to have a phone that I could message my wife on and text her, and just have something there, right? And I say shitty Windows phone because Windows phones at the time, they didn't have any fucking apps. Like literally, I think the only app that was there was Facebook, but Kick and like any cool games, yeah, right, have fun with that. And so again, I was just happy to get it. But at the time, when I was going to hang out with my future wife at that point, I didn't have one. The only thing that I had with me at the time was a shitty tablet that my dad got me during Black Friday. And it's not like I had like cellular signal or anything like that. It needed Wi-Fi for me to access everything that I had. But I thought, you know what, I'm gonna take it just in case I need to go back to my Kick messages and see if I could find out if she told me like the address. Little did I know that without internet, you could only see so many messages before it just stops loading, right? And so I'm walking around her neighborhood, and keep in mind it's fucking hot outside. It's during the summer, and I'm walking around drenched in sweat, just hoping that I could find her house. Again, I've never been to the neighborhood. I've never seen her house. I've never been there before. And so I'm walking around and just like for an hour. And then I see someone come out. Again, it's very early in the morning. I think like 8 in the morning. Someone's outside watering their grass. And I sit there like looking at them, like dead ass, sitting in the corner of the street, looking at this person watering their grass, trying to muster the courage to walk up to them and ask them for their fucking Wi-Fi password. So fucking embarrassing, right? But I never did it. I couldn't put myself through that situation. And so after like 30, damn near 40 minutes of waiting there, just trying to, again, muster the courage to go up to this person, I decided to throw in the towel and just say, fuck it, I'm going to go home. Like, there's no fucking shot that I'm going to find a house that I've never been in. And so I start walking with my head down low, just kind of like knowing that I'm about to walk in this goddamn heat for like an hour and a half to get back home, right? And so, and for whatever reason, I didn't think of the concept of, okay, if I go home, I could just wait it out, take a shower, then ask my mom to see if she could bring me at a fucking reasonable time. I was just defeated, and I knew that it wasn't going to happen at that point, right? I thought, or at least I thought. And so I'm walking home with my head down low, and I just start hearing someone yelling my name, like Alex, 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 like just a couple times. And I'm like, what the hell is happening? Like, I'm about to have a heat stroke or something like that? Cause it's fucking hot outside. and I keep hearing my name, and I turn around. I turn to my left eventually because I was still walking. I turn to my left, and I just see uh my wife, Alessi. I'll say her name, Alessi, just to make it easier for the story purposes. I see Alessi, and so I'm like, oh fuck! Like finally, I'm able to find her house. And as I'm walking towards her house, I start to notice that her parents are packing their car, like as if they're gonna go somewhere, go out of town. Like it looks like they were gonna go camping. And so I walk in. I don't walk in. I'm waiting for her. She essentially brings me to her room, and she sits me down on her bed. And instead of saying like hi, having a conversation, I'm just kind of like starstruck at this moment. Like I'm in her house. I'm in her fucking room. I'm sitting in her bed, and then to put the cherry on top, she practically grabs my face and just kisses me. And in the movies when that happens, the nerdy kid gets kissed by the popular girl at the end of the movie, and it's kind of just like almost like on the verge of passing out. That's how I felt. As cheesy as it sounds, that's how I felt. And so she kisses me. She doesn't like even let me process it before she just leaves the room. And so I'm there just like, trying to take it all in. And she comes back and she says, hey, my parents are actually gonna go camping and they're gonna leave, and they want to take us to my grandma's house. Are you cool with that? And I was like, yeah, sure, whatever, we're just gonna hang out. And so we go. I'm sitting in the back of my future uh father-in-law's car. Not even, obviously I never expected that to happen, but I'm sitting there in the car just super awkward. No one's talking. I'm pretty sure my mother-in-law and low-key my father-in-law are kind of mad. And so they drop us off at her grandma's house, in this like trailer park area. And we're just sitting on the outside of her grandma's porch, and we're just kind of talking for a while, just kind of like talking about the previous time that we tried to hang out and how awkward it was, and how we're happy we kept on talking to each other, and just kind of making jokes, being a little awkward, being a little shy, because again, I was starting to get a lot of feelings for her, and I knew that she liked me to some extent too. And so I just was really really cherishing that moment, to be honest. I felt as if I never really wanted to stop talking to her, and I felt right being there. I felt it was the very first time for a bit the very first time in a while where I just felt safe. I felt that comfort. And so eventually we go inside. Her grandma's there. I think she shows up because she wasn't there. She to let us in. She makes us breakfast, and we were hanging out. We ended up watching movies with her niece, with her cousin, and it was just a super chill time. And at some point, I mustered the courage to sing Radiohead to her, which I've never sung to anybody, nor do I sing to this day. But I just felt comfortable again, and it was just in the moment, right? And at some point, we were like just kind of cuddling and just kind of hanging out, and she's like, hey, are you gonna ask me? Are you gonna ask me? And I'm like, ask you? And I'm like, oh yeah, do you want to be my girlfriend? Like I was so in the moment that I completely forgot that I hadn't even asked her to be my girlfriend. And I asked her, do you want to be my girlfriend? She said yes, thankfully. And we kissed, and it was really cool. And then at some point we walked to my parents' house, to my house, because it wasn't so far, and we hung out. I introduced her to my mom, and we were hanging out in my room. I'm not sure if my room had a door at that point, or if my mom specifically told me to keep the door open. But yeah, we hung out in my room, and then she left. And I felt, you ever go to a concert, or like you go see like a really crazy, really, really good movie that you've been waiting to see, and it exceeded all expectations. In fact, it blew you away to levels you never expected. And then you leave the theater, you leave the concert, and you get that like post movie, post concert depression. That's how it felt when she left. Like 20 minutes later, I started feeling like that. And slowly but surely, for the next couple hours, I'm like, I feel a way that I've never felt before. I feel like I've never felt before. I feel as if I've never felt before, and this is the first time I've done it. But no, I started to feel like, what is happening? Why do I feel this way? And I took a bit for me to admit it to myself, but I was in love. Like day one, I was in love, and there was like no denying it. Like I wasn't a believer of like love at first sight or anything like that. But that day to me, I fell in love with her like almost immediately after she left. And what do I do? How do I try to figure out, do I sit on it for a while? Do I try to like analyze the situation? No, I immediately go on Facebook and ask people for advice. And some people did end up messaging me, and someone told me, don't rush into things. You don't want to scare her away. If you really like her, if you really feel like this, give her some time, give yourself time to see if it's real, essentially. And so she obviously had me friended. She saw the post and she was asking me what was wrong. And I told her that nothing was wrong. And after some bit of me being dramatic, being a dramatic scene kid, and putting a couple dots in my messages, dot, 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 she was like, okay, you got to tell me what's going on. And so I confessed, like, hey, I really fell in love with you this day, blah, blah, blah. And I don't know, I'm kind of scared because I don't want to push you away and, rush you into something that you're not comfortable in. And she said, look, she pretty much told me like, look, I obviously loved the day that we spent, and, I'm very much into you, but I think we should like take it one step at a time, give each other some time to see if it's really something that we want to really commit to and really say to one another, right? The words I love you are pretty strong. And the fact that she was, at the time we were stupid teenagers, but that the fact that she told me something like that, for whatever reason, it just kind of hit very strong to me. And it kind of put me in a situation where it made me realize that like she was potentially in a previous relationship that wasn't exactly the best, and she didn't really want to rush into anything. And I knew that the feelings that I had for her were extremely real. And so I'm very thankful that I allowed myself to be patient and to go with what she said, because again, I'm a teenager. Maybe I'm impatient. I'm a very impatient person. At times I'm just impatient. But I'm really happy that I, allowed myself to say, okay, let's just take it one step at a time to see if it's really real for her and also for me. Because again, it's feelings that I'm developing one day after we hung out, and I really want to make sure that I feel this way, and that I don't push her away, because that's what I was scared of at the time. And so we were talking a ton, again, just spending as much time as we could talking. And I say specifically talking online because, again, at the time I was just getting grounded. I feel like for the first couple of months of our relationship, I was just straight up grounded. It was very rare for me to be able to go out at that time. And there were a couple times where I was able to hang out with her and go out and do something with her and her parents or her family. And it was days like that that I really, really cherished and really, really hoped would happen. But again, unfortunately, sometimes I just couldn't go because I was fucking grounded, just doing dumb shit. And, my mom telling me that I'm not doing good in school. And so I couldn't do it. And so it didn't also help the fact that, maybe I was in that era where I wasn't really grounded. I was able to see her whenever I wanted to. But even if I wanted to see her every single day, I couldn't, because my in-laws, they were my in-laws, but my now in-laws, they are very much of that old way of thinking, especially when it comes to like growing up Hispanic. They didn't see us as like, we're not married, of course, we're just boyfriend and girlfriend. You don't need to be seeing each other every day. It's considered rude. And don't get me started on, potentially having her come over to my house, because what would people think of the girl going over to the man's house, right? And so our day for us, the only day with some exceptions of us meeting on days where I was invited to go do something with them, our day for us was on Fridays. And at that point, I was already at the alternative high school. And so on Fridays, I would take my skateboard. I would go to Salvation Army to look for CDs. I would skate to the park close to the high school that she was going to. So again, she was going to another high school. I would stop by, I would smoke a couple cigarettes because I still had some time to kill, and I would go and meet up with her. We would walk together to her mom's work, wait for her to finish so she could drive us home to her house. And those days were literally my everything. Days where we could hang out, watch a movie in her room, just maybe at times do nothing, cuddle, kiss, be with one another. And it was like the very first time we hung out, just me and her. It was comforting. It was funny. It was very much what I needed because at the time, at that alternative high school, I going into it, I didn't know anybody. I knew there was people there that I went to the other high school with that also got sent there, but for the most part, I didn't speak to anybody. The very first couple of weeks with lunch, I felt as if everyone was staring at me because I was eating with no one. Right, I was eating with no one, and it was the first time that I felt very very much alone. And so after a week of that, after getting to Friday, surviving the week of those feelings of loneliness, I got to see her, and it just all got taken away. Like, it made the shitty week so much worth it. And I don't know if I've ever told her that, but she essentially made my weeks, to be honest, because again, maybe I was doing good in school, but I was still doing some dumb shit that was getting me into trouble with my parents. And it was very much a very stress-free and just very very happy day for me where I got to hang out with her. And so that went on for quite a while, where literally the only times that we would see each other were on Fridays. And again, on occasion, as we got older, we were kind of allowed more freedom. We were allowed to hang out more than just Fridays at times, right? And it was because of her, to be honest, that I learned how to drive and I was able to get my license. Because my parents, my mom is she's a scaredy cat. She never wanted to teach me how to drive because she would be afraid that she was just going to be scared out of her mind. My dad never bothered even to teach me how to drive because he knew that he has a short temper. He knows he has a short temper, and he didn't want to be raging at me all the fucking time and get frustrated. And so I was just pretty much left to figure it out. And I did. I would here and there sneak the cars, take the car out on days where they were not there for the weekend. If you're watching this, parents, did that. I did do that. I'm pretty sure you already know at that point, but I did that. But for the most part, and to give you guys a little bit of a lore, my wife is a single child, and so my mother-in-law is very much she is very work oriented. She has her own business. She doesn't answer to nobody. She's a boss ass bitch, and she is just her own boss. So she does pretty good with what she does. My father-in-law also has a pretty good job, and so everything, they only had to worry about one kid, and they worried very much for that kid. They give her tons of love, to the point of maybe she's a little bit spoiled, but to be honest, if I only had one kid, I would give him the world, and that's what they did. I don't blame them for doing what they did, because she is very much their world still to this day. And I feel, I honestly, at times I envy that, but that's a conversation for another day. I love them to death. My in-laws are just some of the most amazing, genuine people that I've ever met, and had the pleasure of calling them my second parents. But yeah, so she had her own car. Long story short, she had her own car, my wife. And so on days where we would go out, go to the mall, just literally do anything, extracurricular activities, as I like to call them, she allowed me to drive, even though I didn't have a permit. I didn't have a license to my name. And surprisingly, I know that I was a very good driver because I never, still to this day, knock on fucking wood, I've never been pulled over for speeding or for doing anything stupid, right? So I consider myself a very careful but yet good driver. And so I learned to drive with her, and eventually I used her car to get my license. And it was things like that that I was just learning to do with her. Things that I never got to experience, I got to experience with her. And I could go on about so much about our relationship as boyfriend and girlfriend, but from the beginning, in the beginning, not from the beginning, but in the beginning, it took us a bit to really find our groove and really be, I feel like in a stable spot, because I was very much getting used to the fact that this was very much going to be a very serious relationship for me. The feelings I had were real, and I'd be damned if anything was going to happen to this relationship. So I knew I was in it for the long run. And the way that, kind of the vibe that I was getting from her felt very similar to what I was feeling. The words that she would tell me were genuine about how she felt, and just the way that she would do things for our relationship. It felt very real to me, and it felt as if she was in it for the long haul, essentially, right? As was I. And so it took me a bit, because again, the standards for my previous relationships were so low. I felt as if I never really learned how to be a proper boyfriend. And so it took a bit for me to adapt to knowing what it was to have those situations where I hang out with my partner, where I create a moment of, love, essentially, right? Dates and just doing small things. And it really took me a bit, to be completely honest with you. It took me a bit to learn what it meant to be a decent slash good partner. And I obviously don't regret it, because I just, based off previous experiences, I can't really blame myself for how I was at the beginning. But obviously, one of the things that I really, really didn't want to do was just be in a mood, or be in a way that I felt as if my dad was at times with my mom, and I knew that I never wanted to become that. And so at some point, there was a situation where maybe we had a disagreement, and it was very within character of me to just get frustrated. And I just remember making an ass of myself, to the point where I had to leave the room, and to compose myself or something like that, but not in a healthy way. It was just me, trying to make things worse or whatever. That I sat in that bathroom and I cried, like literally cried, because of how embarrassed, how ashamed I was that I was being a way that I promised myself that I was never going to be, especially in a relationship that I really, really cherished. And so from that moment, I decided that I didn't want to become that. I didn't want to be toxic. I didn't want to not make my partner feel as if she can't come to me whenever she wants to talk about something, or a concern, or maybe be real with me about something that I'm doing wrong. And so we really, really worked on that, really worked on things like jealousy, and, being trusting of one another. And it took us a bit. It obviously did take us a bit. But we were able to work it out. I really, really value my relationship, because whenever there's an issue, whenever something arises, maybe a disagreement or something like that, we are able to work it out, and actually allow ourselves to talk to one another about how we're feeling, how things make us feel. And the last thing I want is for my partner, the person that I love the most, to feel uncomfortable with bringing something up, or maybe feel as if they can't talk to me about certain things, because I'm going to react a certain way. And that's what I really, even though I feel like I do a good job at it now, I obviously always want to work on that, to be open-minded, to be a good listener to her, so that I could try to understand where she's coming from, and be more in touch with her feelings as well. And so the boyfriend and girlfriend era for us, was very much learning how it was for us to take a relationship seriously, and really, really try to learn what it was to be with one another. Towards around the time that we got married in 2016, late 2015, maybe the middle of 2015, we had graduated. We were being able to obviously hang out with one another a little bit more, go out and do things more with one another. We had previously talked about the concept of marriage. We knew that we wanted to be with each other forever. And we started talking about marriage and kids. I know we were super young, but we started talking about kids. But the topic of marriage just kept on getting brought up. And the benefits of it too. especially since, we were both potentially looking into getting into college, me for one thing, her for another. But we knew that getting married potentially could be beneficial. And with the type of job that my mother-in-law has, she very much laid it out for us, like, hey, these are the benefits or whatever. Let alone the fact that we would be granted obviously complete freedom because we would be married to each other, and we were free to just hang out and do whatever we wanted whenever we wanted, right? And so we really thought about it. And so going into 2016, the talks of getting married were essentially serious. Like, we really wanted to get married that year. And so we decided, like, okay, we want to get married, right? We want to get married. And so we bring it up to her parents, and I feel as if my father-in-law was kind of speechless. He didn't really know what to say, but I think they were happy at the end of it. And my mother-in-law was essentially already pushing for it, but I think that conversation still had her a little bit speechless, but for the most part they were very supportive of it. We did the same with my parents. My parents took that opportunity to roast the fuck out of me, essentially to tell me that I had essentially nothing going for me. What did I have to offer her that gave me the right to even think that I should be deserving of getting married to her, right? And obviously the fact that she was a only child, that she lives to a certain standard and has certain means or whatever, she was gonna expect this certain lifestyle or whatever. And that still to this day doesn't really sit right with me, because it painted her to be like, maybe, the standards were too high, that I would need to be rich essentially to be able to do whatever lifestyle she had, which wasn't anything, bombastic or, unruly or just insanely unattainable, right? Her parents just really worked really hard. And again, she was an early child and they gave her the world, right? And so they kind of were really, really grilling me for it. And so at the end of the day, they just essentially said, hey, if you want to get married, we can't do anything about it. That's just what our opinion. We're going to support you regardless, but that's something that you really need to think about. And so both her parents and my parents agreed that they would want to meet, all six of us, right, to eat and to really talk about it. And again, that led to one of the most awkward days of my life. One of the most, just me speechless, just fucking getting beat down essentially, not from my in-laws per se, but more so my parents. My parents are not afraid to roast the fuck out of me in public and to other people, and to really, really grill me for shit regardless of who's in the room. And so again, I was just kind of essentially hyperbole taking a word beating. And even still, on the ride back home, they were just telling me if I was serious about it, if, blah, 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 what I needed to do, essentially, right? Telling me that I'm useless, essentially. It felt like that's what they were telling me. But regardless, they were fully supportive. They said that they would even help pay for the celebration wedding or whatever. And we had a date, right? Shortly thereafter, my mother-in-law found a place for us to have it in because she was very excited. And we had a date of when we were going to get married. If you notice, I didn't mention anything about proposing, because even though we knew when we were going to get married, we already had that date. It was in December 10th. I still had yet to propose to her. I didn't have money. I didn't have a single dollar to my name. And I figured, okay, I need to do something. I obviously need to fucking propose to her. And so October time came around, late September came around, and I applied for a seasonal job at a Party City, to work during the Halloween time. And, I only worked that 1 month. I got paid, and I used that paycheck to pay for the engagement ring that I gave her. It was a really cool ring that she had previously showed me. And I decided to just buy it and give her that as an engagement. And so, okay, I got the ring. Now, how do I give it to her? I have to propose to her in a nice way, right? And so I came up with this really cool plan of going to Salvation Mountain. If you guys don't know what Salvation Mountain is, look it up. It's a pretty cool, it's like a big art piece essentially, right? And people are free to go and visit it. And it's like there's like a mountain. One of the center points of it is like a big mountain. And in the middle of the mountain, there's like a big heart that says love or something in it, right? And so my idea was to go to Salvation Mountain, walk around a little bit, take some pictures, really, really nice. I'd be dressing nice. She'd be dressing nice with her makeup done and or whatever. And towards the end, once we take pictures, my plan was to ask someone to take a picture of us in front of the mountain, but I would go up to this person, random person, and tell them to not take a picture, but instead record while I propose. Sounds pretty awesome, right? Sounds pretty romantic or whatever. You get the reaction of the crowd, and it was actually a pretty busy day. There was a good amount of people there, so probably the reaction would have been really cool, and a really cool video would have came out of it, right? We get there, we do what I said. We go throughout. We're taking pictures in different places. We pass that mountain and we're kind of standing there, just literally standing there. As I'm working up the courage to tell her and do what I said, execute the plan. At some point, I see a stranger and I asked them to take a picture, but I couldn't say the words. And so they literally just ended up taking a picture of us in front of the mountain. And so I started to realize that I was gonna be a pussy and bitch out, but I allowed myself some time. And we sat down like at a bench or some stools or something like that, just to kind of chill out, take in the scenery, people watch for a bit. And it started to drag on for a bit to the point where she was asking me like, hey, like, are you good? Or, it's getting a little cold or whatever. Should we go? And I just gave in. I threw in the towel and I said, yeah, let's just go. We're done. There's nothing else for us to do. Let's just go, trying to play it cool, super depressed on the inside. We're driving by, we're literally just going back home, no plans afterwards, nothing like that. And we start passing by these fields, like these like really big fields, and some of the fields have sunflowers. And so I was like, okay, dude, you couldn't muster up the courage to ask her over at Salvation Mountain. At least pull over, walk you and her to the field and do it by yourself. It'll be romantic. There will be a lot of like sunflowers if you guys want to take like selfies or something like that. Do that at least. We keep driving. The sunflowers are no more fields with sunflowers. I reach into my pocket and I'm like feeling the ring. I'm like, dude, just pull over, do something, go back, say you forgot something or whatever. I couldn't do it. We get back to my house first and I say, I need to fucking do it. Like, that was my whole goal. I need to fucking do it. And in front of my house, in my Porsche, we're walking to my front door, my parents' house's front door, and I drop to one knee, and she doesn't immediately see me go on one knee. She keeps on walking. She keeps on walking because I did it so suddenly without making a noise. And so I essentially had to call her over, like, hey, like, I'm over here. And she's like, you're not behind me? And so she turns around, she sees me on one knee. I'm holding out the ring. I say, I love you. Will you please marry me? Will you marry me? Will you please marry me? begging her essentially after what I went through. Please, will you marry me? And she says yes. She's really excited. We go inside, we're cuddling. She's really, really excited. She takes a picture. She posts it. We go to her parents' house. We're hanging out there. I think they show up and then, we tell them what's up or whatever, making it official. And so that was in October. Next month in November, I turned 20. Just had turned 20. She was 19. In December, early December, we get married. And I want to talk about that day for a bit. I know we're reaching the 1 hour point, but I want to talk about that day for a bit because around the time, one of the things that I was being told about me having the idea of getting married, I was being told, hey, don't you think you're a little bit too young to get married? Like, you still very much have your whole life ahead of you. Don't you want to experience relationships and be with other women or whatever? And that was one of the things that I was like thinking about, obviously, right? Because I was young. I don't know a lot of people that had gotten married at my age, but I think I was pretty much on autopilot that day. I feel like if I wasn't thinking of literally anything, I knew that we were going to meet up at a park to have a photo shoot at a certain time. And so I was just going on about that day. It's not like I was nervous. It's not like I was anxious. but I was just kind of, again, on autopilot. Like I was just, my body was just doing things that I needed to do. I got dressed. I drove myself to the park. I met up with the photographer, and at some point, I saw my wife. And as soon as I saw her walking up to me to take pictures, I knew that like, the fog in my head went away, and all I saw was her. I saw in the moment, it was a reminder that I was allowed to be in a situation where I was about to get married to the most beautiful, the most gorgeous individual that I had ever had the privilege of laying my eyes on. She walked up to me, and the the butterflies, the feelings of happiness and just anxiousness, everything kicked in. And we took pictures with my parents, my in-laws. We took pictures by ourselves. And I just remember like not being able to stop looking at her because she was gorgeous. Like the dress that she decided to wear, and I didn't know anything about it. The dress that she decided to wear, the headpiece, and the way that she did her hair, her makeup, everything about her was perfect. She was perfect. She is perfect in my eyes. But it all just clicked to me like, fuck everything I've been told. I'm making the right decision. This is what I'm meant to be doing. And so we have a good celebration after we take pictures. And there was a lot of our family there, and it was just a really, really good time, really, really fun. Nothing too big. After that, we had booked ourselves a hotel, a really nice hotel where we live. We decided my cousin messaged me because he wasn't able to be there at the wedding. He was driving to where we were living to see us get married, but he just couldn't make it on time. And he messages at me saying, hey, do you guys want to meet up and smoke a little bit? And so we did. We went to Walmart. After that, we got snacks and we were just hanging out. We went to our hotel room, and then after that, the day after, we went on a little honeymoon trip to San Diego. And it was just amazing. Like honestly, like that day is essentially engraved into my head as one of the most special days of my life, where we made it official of we were together forever, right? And I know some people, don't need, I feel like as if you don't need marriage to be with someone and consider them your forever. But for me and for her, it really was like that stamp and that like seal of, okay, now you got the fucking law involved. Once you got the government involved, it's like, yeah, this shit's fucking serious. And to me, it was fucking serious. It's always been serious. And just like when we were boyfriend and girlfriend, we very much had to adapt to something new, because immediately after we came back from San Diego, I didn't tell my parents this, but immediately after we came back from San Diego, we stopped at my house. I got a couple of pieces of clothing and some things, and I moved out. I moved out and I moved into my in-laws' house, to her house. And again, something that I didn't even tell. We didn't tell any of our parents, but my parents were kind of like, okay, well, I guess he's married. We can't really tell him anything anymore. And my in-laws were kind of expecting for that to happen, and actually kind of wanted that to happen, right? Because again, their daughter was still there, and it would just be me moving in. And I like to think that they liked me to some extent for that to be allowed, right? And so we were kind of like on cloud nine at that point. It felt immaculate. It felt amazing, uh the following days and the following weeks just felt amazing. And so as we're approaching the new year, the 31st comes around. Before the 31st came around, my cousin, who lives in Los Angeles at the time, he messages me, or he calls me. He gives me a call and he says, hey, congratulations. Sorry I couldn't be there at the wedding, but I wanted to call you because I wanted to ask if you wanted a job. And I said, a job? Like where? You work over there. Like, where are you offering me a job? And he said, I'm offering you a job here, in the company that I work in Los Angeles. and it's for a job that does like manual stuff, like heavy lifting, and going driving a lot and just doing stuff like that. It's not construction, but you would go door to door and install things here and there. Sometimes it got heavy because you had to lift doors, etc., stuff like that. And so he was like, hey, like, if you want the job, you just got married, maybe you want to earn yourself a little bit of money. It's a good start. It's a good job. You could earn yourself a lot of money. And so I didn't really take him serious because I was like, how the fuck am I going to move to Los Angeles? Like, how is that even going to really be reasonable? How is that even going to work? And so I didn't really give him a thought, and I didn't really give him a call back or an answer. I just kind of let it be. And I told my wife, and we're just kind of like, we didn't scoff at it, but we didn't really take the offer seriously. As we're approaching the new year, close to the 31st, he calls me back and he says, hey, like, have you thought about it? Like, I'm being serious about it. And I'm not sure if my dad talked to him or he talked to my dad, but my dad knew, and he obviously told me to do it. That I'm married now, that I should really start looking for a good job, that it's a good job, that I'll start making my own money, etc., etc. Future family bullshit, right? And so I talk about it with my wife, and we say, okay, she was already trying to look for a school over there for what she wanted to do, and so we decided that I was just gonna do it. And so I told my cousin, okay, yeah, I'll do it. I'll start whenever you need me to. And so New Year's comes around, we go over to Ensenada with my dad's side, and it was quite honestly one of the most boring, most depressing kind of New Year's Eve and New Year's Day, just due to the fact that, I to be completely honest with you, my dad's side is a little bit more, reserved, I guess. So it wasn't as wild as, if we were on my mom's side or going to another family member's house. So it was kind of a little bit boring, but at the same time, I knew that when we would go back, that I would be leaving my wife for, I don't know for how long, right? Because I was going to move to Los Angeles to start this new job. And she had found a school. She actually had not found a school until a couple, I think, when she had already moved in with me, but I moved to Los Angeles by myself first. And I just remember the day coming, and it was one of the most depressing fucking days. I had not broken down like that ever. And I was just in tears, like in uncontrollable tears. I could just not stop it. Like, I was in the car when I left with my cousin to Los Angeles, just crying, like trying to hold back because it wasn't just him, but it was also his wife. And I was in the front, in the passenger seat, just not even looking or saying anything, bro. I was just so fucking, I was so sad, like so sad to leave my wife, the person that I just married, was so fucking depressing. I already had gotten used to sleeping, falling asleep to her, waking up to her, doing everything together, but it felt so short lived because I was already leaving and I didn't know when she would move up. You know what I mean? And so I move up there. It was, again, the beginning of the year. It was extremely cold. It was cloudy over there. And I stayed at my other cousin's house, actually, the brother of the one that gave me the job, and the cousin that I would look up to so much. And so I was staying with him. I was kind of stoked because, again, I've had previous experiences staying over at his house and going on road trips with him, and so it just felt really cool. But he was already before he was visiting. Now I was kind of living with him, right? And he already had his own routine, right, of going to work, getting out kind of late, but also going out and meeting people, going out to the bar. And again, I was just only 20, so if I wanted to do anything with him, go to a bar or anything, I couldn't. I wasn't legally allowed to because I wasn't 21. I wouldn't turn 21 until the end of the year, right? And so I couldn't really do anything. When we would go out, it would just be to like a restaurant or something like that, but we really couldn't do anything. So there were a couple of nights, there were several nights where I would go to bed by myself and it was cold. I didn't have a bed. I was sleeping on like a fucking military bed that he had, a military cot that he had. And I remember just waking up cold and being traumatized by the fucking iPhone alarm sound, to the point where I can't have that alarm sound myself. I had to change it because it was literally giving me fucking flashbacks of those days. And it just felt cold. I felt lonely. I felt alone, even though I was with someone that I liked hanging out with, but I was very much homesick and I was missing my wife. So much so that the first weekend that I was given free, I went down because my in-laws, I think, had offered me to had let me use one of their cars, right? Uh, to My wife actually said, you know what? When next time you come down, you could take my car so that you could drive yourself to work. You don't have to rely on anybody. And if you want to come down, you have the car, right? And I was like, hell yeah, like that sounds awesome. And so I went down and I worked Saturdays, but I was given Sundays and Mondays off. But I didn't want to go back home. I actually lied about some random bullshit about the car not working to where so that I could stay another day on Tuesday, and I left on Tuesday night, right? And so I went back super depressed, but at least I had her car, so I could get around and do whatever it is that I wanted to do if I really wanted to. And eventually, I just remember one night I was hanging out with my cousin. He had a roommate at the time, and so we were all hanging out, just kind of smoking in their living room or in the kitchen or something like that. Just we were just shooting the shit, having a good time, making each other laugh. And his roommate has like an odd day because his dude is kind of weird. Like you never know in what mood he's going to be. But that night he was in a good mood. And he was like, hey, like you mentioned you're married, right? And I'm like, yeah, I'm married. She lives where I lived, and I'm just kind of waiting to see, trying to figure out where we could like find a place to have so that she could come over here. And he's like, why don't you just tell her to move in with us, right? You could take your cousin's room, and if he doesn't mind, he could stay in the living room. There's a big living room, and I'll just stay with my room, right? And I turned to my cousin, and he was like, yeah, I didn't even actually think of that. Like, I don't mind, I don't really care where I sleep. So I wouldn't mind you taking over my room. And so he was like, okay, let's do it, right? Actually, what happened was the other roommate moved into my cousin's room because he felt as if he didn't need such a big room, and I was given the roommate's room, right? And my cousin ended up setting up in the living room because it was a big living room, and he didn't really care about where he was sleeping. He was very much a chill person. And so I told my wife, and she was super ecstatic. And I don't know how long after that it took for her to move over here. But as soon as we were reunited, it just felt like a weight was lifted off my shoulders. I needed her. Like I desperately, desperately needed her there with me for me to, survive and be fucking happy, because I was feeling so fucking depressed, to be honest. Again, I woke up, kind of like Twilight, where everything is fucking blue and gloomy and doomy. It kind of felt like that. And so I was just super excited. And honestly, the first couple of months of us being there together in Los Angeles was really good. She was able to find a school. She started going to school. She really liked it. I was working. I was getting myself some of my own money, and it was good until it wasn't. Things quickly started to change for us, both financially and just with everything else going on. At some point, without really getting into too much specifics, my cousin starts going through a very heavy depression, very heavy anxiety, and it really shifted the course of everything. Because also at the time, I started to really not enjoy my job whatsoever. I had a lot of problems with my job, and how I was taking it and how I felt about it, and it was just, again, just making me kind of anxious and kind of depressed. It also didn't really help that I had gone in a car crash at one point in the highway, and so that never really helped the situation, because again, I was kind of nervous about driving every day and going on the highway after that car crash. And so I was just going through it, and I could tell that she was too, that we would have our breaking points at times. And again, that was another lesson for me to be understanding and understand that I'm not always going to be able to fix everything on the spot, and not always am I going to be able to, fix things at all, right? And there's going to be times where my wife doesn't necessarily want me to fix things. She just wants to know that I'm there and that everything is going to be okay. But my dumbass and me, being the man, the husband, thought that I needed to fix everything. And even though I just didn't really need to, or simply couldn't, right? So we had to go through that. It really helped us understand what it meant to do that for each other. And again, my cousin was going through that. I was going through that with my job. She was, obviously stressing about the whole situation. And at some point, through that roommate is not there. Like he just randomly leaves. Like he tells us that his job put him somewhere else and he had to leave for a couple of months, and he did. He left for a couple of months. And I will say during those months it felt kind of nice, to be honest, right? Regardless of what was going on, because my cousin wasn't there, unfortunately, just due to unforeseen and unfortunate circumstances. The other roommate was in there, so we didn't really have to put up with his, you know, him being in different moods, different days. And so it was just me and my wife, kind of having our own place for a bit, right? And we really had the opportunity to know what it was to have our own place for a little bit, even if it was for a couple of months. But regardless, those months were just kind of dreadful, to be honest. Again, just due to everything going on, and also because of the financial situation. I wasn't making a whole lot of money in that job, and living in fucking Los Angeles was very, very difficult. And again, not to mention that one of the people helping pay rent, my cousin, he was essentially moved out and wasn't going to start paying an apartment that he wasn't going to live in anymore, right? And that roommate thankfully was still paying for the apartment, and we had to make it work. We had no other option. My wife was still going to school. She wasn't going to finish until November, and we just kind of had to stick it out. There was no other option, right? Her parents didn't pay that much amount of money for her to go to that school, just for us to move back and make it go to waste, essentially, right? And so at one point, that roommate that we had comes back and essentially tells us, hey, so while I was gone, I decided that I don't want to live here anymore. You guys can't live here anymore. And even if we wanted to, we legally couldn't, because we were not even in part of the lease. So he was going to move out, and he had already found people to essentially take over the apartment. And he gave us a certain amount of time before we needed to get our shit out and move, right? And so very quickly we had to figure out what the fuck we were going to do. Like, we only had a handful of days to move out. And so we had my in-laws come over and take a bunch of our shit back to their house. We at one point had bought an actual bed, because we were on an inflatable bed for a bit. We bought our own bed, and that felt like such a really cool thing for us. We had to go back to the inflatable bed because, again, it was just one of those things that we could not have. And it just became very depressing, to be honest, very sad for us. And to the point where the time came where we had to leave the apartment, and we had no other option but to book a hotel for a couple of days. Not even a hotel, but like a motel in a pretty sketchy part of LA, to be honest. And I just remember, like, we dealt with it, but it wasn't necessarily like the most healthy thing for us, to be honest. To know that, we're spending money on this motel room. We have to get out at some point because we cannot afford it to keep living here until we need to finish. So what the fuck are we going to do? The options for us to move back was not going to happen. It couldn't happen. And so we were just stuck with the dilemma and left with no options. I reached out to my cousin, the one that had given me the job. And I said, hey, dude, look, like, this is what's going on. We're essentially homeless at this point. Like, I have no other way to turn, nobody else to turn here besides you. And I asked him if he would be so gracious enough to let us stay at his place. And I didn't want to even ask him, because it's not like he has a whole house. He was living in a studio, a very nice studio, but a studio very much just meant for two people, him and his wife. And thankfully he is one of the most down to earth people, very humble people, very nice person. His wife is as well. And they said, yeah, like, you could stay for as long as you need. And thankfully at that point, we only really needed a couple of weeks for us. I'm not sure how much it was. It might have been 2-3 weeks that we needed to stay there. But again, we felt like such a fucking burden, right? I felt weird getting home earlier than him, because he was a manager at where we worked, and he would stay there longer than me, making sure that everything was okay. It would feel weird for me to come home. She was there doing her thing, and it just felt like such a burden. Even though maybe they don't see it that way, you're intruding in their space. They're used to their own routine and used to doing things a certain way. And it felt weird waking up in the morning, having to pass by their bed because I needed to go to the restroom and shower, right? It just felt like such a burden. And there were moments where, even things for us like finding parking, because the parking situation there was kind of fucked up, and so finding parking was like a fucking hassle. And I remember one day, my wife coming home from school, she couldn't find parking, and just that simple thing, because we were already fucking going through it, like not even finding a parking spot was something that we could achieve. She just broke down, and it just felt like the world was coming down on us essentially, right? And so we had to work, really, really work through those rest of the weeks. And the day that her graduation happened, we were so fucking relieved. We went. It was a very humble, very cool little graduation with all her friends and colleagues that also were graduating and went to school with her. We went out to eat, and then the next day we just left. And we packed all our shit in 2 cars, because we had taken 2 cars, because we knew that she had her own car, I had my own car. We packed our shit, we left. And I could tell you that the whole drive I was with a smile, blasting music, just listening to it, and just being so happy to be going back home to a very familiar territory. And once we got back, we obviously moved back into her parents' house. It was like a weight was lifted off our shoulders. And that sleep was on that night when we slept was honestly like one of the best night's sleeps I've ever gotten. It just felt like a weight was lifted off our shoulders. It felt like the stress was non-existent. And to top it all off, when we came back, I think it was in December, we were planning on going to New York, thanks to her grandma, who had given us the present of us going to New York. And so we just felt relieved and just so happy. That year of being in LA, and obviously I haven't not really going into detail too much about it or anything like that, just a brief overview of that year, was the year that I credit for really developing my anxiety. If I didn't already have some sort of a form of anxiety, once I came back, it hit me like a truck because of what I had gone through. But I knew that year really cemented it for us, because that was the first year that we were married, with that full year that we were married. And for us to have gone through so fucking much in that little bit of time really, really like cemented it for me, like that I made the right choice, that we made the right choice. And that if we could go through this bullshit, we could jump over these hurdles and go through this together, not by ourselves, but together. We knew that we were essentially unstoppable as a married couple. We knew that there wasn't anything that we can't achieve. And honestly, still to this day, any hardship, everything, we deal with it the way that we do, and we know that we're gonna make it work, because I really pride myself and pride our marriage of being, I feel like, very healthy, in the sense that we could talk to one another and be real, not do the whole silent treatment. We don't test each other to see if we love each other. When I tell her every single minute, essentially, or as much as I possibly can, how much I love her, because I never want her to feel as if I don't, or I don't say it enough, or that I don't mean it. I want her to know how much I love her, and I'll tell her all fucking day how much I love her, how beautiful she is, because I want her to know, and I want her to feel it, right? Even if she doesn't feel it herself, I want to let her know that I feel it, that I know how beautiful she is. And I don't want her to ever forget that, right? I don't want her to feel as if, that I don't feel like that anymore. When I don't want anybody but her, right? I don't think about anybody but her. The relationship that I have with her is one that I cherish and that I want forever. We say, whenever we celebrate anything or whatever, we say forever and always. And for me, she is my forever. I have forever tattooed inside my finger. She has always inside her finger, on her hand. Because this, for me, this is it. She for me is it. Like, God forbid anything happens to her. God forbid something happens where we have to split up, forcefully, essentially. I'm done. Like, I've been through so much with her that I don't want that with anybody. I don't want to have those experiences with literally anybody but her. And if there, and any new experience, I want it to be with her, because for me, she is my reason to be here, to still be breathing and in this world. Everything in this room that I see, I credit it to her, you know, because I don't think that I would have had the motivation or the drive to become a better version of myself if it wasn't for her. When I talked about my home life in previous episodes, I mentioned how I was pretty much expected to become something that my parents wanted me to be, or expected to go down a certain route. She essentially taught me to say, fuck that. You are your own person. You have your own wants, your own needs, your own goals, and your own desires and things that you want to accomplish. That is what makes you you. And I'm gonna make sure that you always remember that you have someone supporting you when it seems like nobody else is. Because she is my cheerleader, my supporter, my manager, if you want to call it that. Not necessarily my manager, but she is there for literally everything. Anything that I've set my eyes on, or just anything that I've aspired to do, she always just says, I'm down. Like, if you're down, if you're passionate about it, do it. But do it like for sure do it, right? She's the reason why I continue to do content. She's the reason why I want to take this project seriously. She is my reason to always aspire to become something better, to be a better person than I was the previous day. And it's because I want to be able to give her the world and just be about her. Like, my wife is my world, and I'm not afraid to admit that. I don't think that anybody should be afraid to admit that, you know? And I don't mean that just in a way as if, you know, I want to like put up a front. Like, my wife is my end game, essentially, right? She is my reminder that no matter how hard things get, I'm always going to have her. I'm going to be able to have her by my side. And the fact that I'm allowed and you know, I have the privilege of waking up and her being the first thing that I see when I wake up, when I go to bed, as she's sleeping, it makes everything worth it. If the 2015 alarms that I set up didn't already wake me up, you know, or didn't give me motivation to get up, looking at her gives me all the motivation that I need to get off my ass and just get through the day. Because even though she's going to work, I know that I'm going to get to see her for her lunch, for her when she comes home from work. And I cherish that so fucking much. My wife is quite literally my better half. Without her, I don't know where I would be in this world. I don't know what path I would have gone in. But I'm glad that the universe is aligned, the planets aligned, the stars aligned, and it put me in this path of being able to meet such a wonderful, beautiful, effortlessly funny and hilarious, and just incredibly smart. Again, she doesn't give herself her credit about how smart she is. She is incredibly smart. There'd be moments where I'm trying to figure something out, and then she just comes up and she lays it all out for me, analyzes everything, and she just doesn't even recognize the fact that she does that. And I watch her just doing things for her job. She's her own fucking boss. She don't answer to fucking nobody, not even fucking me if she doesn't want to, you know? She's a fucking boss. And I feel as if she doesn't give enough credit for what she has been able to accomplish in the short amount of time that she's been able to do it. I look up to her. I admire her. I aspire to be, you know, to be like her, to be able to have my own business, to do something for myself where I don't have to answer to nobody, because she was very much set up like that by her mom, you know? The idea of you could do this for yourself. The idea of you doing something for yourself so that you could be successful for yourself, and whatever comes, you know, your way, you could achieve it. And so she inspires me to become not only a better person for myself, but also for our marriage, right? To do things for myself, to just love what it is that I do. And if I don't, then to not allow myself to fall in a situation where I'm just miserable, right? I could go on and on. I could talk about her for hours, but if you're listening to this, Alessi, babe, my love, I love you and I thank you. You give me purpose, you give me hope in a world where there's times where I feel like such a pessimist, such a fucking hater. It's hard for me to look at the world and then look at you and not think that this is where I'm meant to be. Because I very much am under the belief that I was placed in this world to be with her and to live the rest of my days for as long as she allows me to be with her. I love her endlessly. I look into her eyes, her beautiful eyes, and it's hard for me not to get emotional, but I look at her and I see so much. I see not only just my wife, but the future mother of my kids. I see her and I growing old together. And just being everything with one another. I don't like being without her. I feel weird being without her. I feel naked being without her. You know that saying. We are bound together by the strongest of glues, the strongest of adhesives, and I feel like as if sometimes people find it weird that we're not with each other, right? It really is a shame that there's people out there that don't see their significant others in a similar way that I do with my wife, because I genuinely feel as if the world would be a much better place. You know, I would think that if you're getting married with somebody, that you're doing it because you love them and they're, you know, it doesn't turn into such a toxic thing. But I'll be damned if I ever allow myself to fall under those stereotypes that men have created throughout history. And I never want to become something that I hate, something that turns into, you know, something that negatively affects my marriage, because my marriage is my fucking everything. My wife is my everything, and it's my pride, it's my joy. I just I just love her so much. I just fucking love her. Words are simply not enough. You know, nothing that I do will ever be enough about how I feel about her and how insanely madly in love I am with her. So thank you. Thank you for allowing me to be the person that I am today. It's the reason why I feel okay with expressing myself. I recently have been getting into jewelry, things like rings, earrings, and chains or whatever. It's the reason why I feel comfortable dyeing my hair. I have a fucking mullet because I feel comfortable. I feel like I'm not gonna get judged, and it doesn't fucking matter. My wife thinks it's fucking cool, so I think it's cool. And I'm just allowed to be myself. You know, a fucking nerd, a fucking gamer, a fucking lover of anime, and just I just feel so happy. I feel blessed. I honestly truly feel so fucking lucky. It's like winning the lottery times a fucking billion. And I'm just so I just cannot thank her enough. I'm gonna leave it at that. Thank you guys so much for watching. My wife, Alessi, if you're listening to this, I love you so much. And thank you for everything. You are my forever and always. You are my zing. You are my better half. You are my everything. And I love you forever. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time. And stay safe. You guys are absolutely beautiful. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. Bye.